And at the end of the 10 weeks, it showed that the people that tracked the positive events in their day, they showed an increase in physical activity, an increase in energy, and a decrease in visits to doctors. So it was essentially saying that by just looking for things that are good and what they appreciate in their day, there's positive benefits mentally, physically, which then ripples out.
Welcome to the Mindful Communication Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Miller. And on today's episode, I sit down with Blake Fly. Blake is a motivational speaker and is on a mission to improve campus culture by helping people realize that they matter. We spend most of the interview talking about the art of appreciation, recognition, and acknowledgement. We discuss why giving and receiving appreciation is just not that common. And we dole out some powerful tips on how you can give a memorable and impactful acknowledgement. I truly believe that giving out great acknowledgements is such an important and good communication skill to have. What I really got from this interview is how rare acknowledgements and appreciations are, and yet how important they are as well. The science is in. Giving and receiving acknowledgements feels great for everyone, and yet we often forget to do it. And there's so many reasons, there are so many barriers that are preventing us from remembering to acknowledge ourselves and others as much as possible throughout our days. And in this wonderful talk with Blake, we really get to dive into why that is and how to get around those blocks. We start off the interview by talking about how Blake got interested in the ideas of kindness, appreciation, and recognition. Blake Fly, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is going to be wicked.
Yeah, so Blake, we actually know each other through some mutual friends, and I'm really excited that we're here today recording live at a studio in Toronto. So thanks for joining me in person.
Well, hey, this is a highlight of my life because I now know about this epic studio and learn more about your epic podcast.
Wonderful. So I want to get started and give our listeners a better idea of who you are. So you're into motivational speaking. How did you get into just like the motivational speaking in general? And then we'll talk later about how you transitioned from, your initial stages to what you're doing right now.
I think back to high school, and for anyone listening in, the high school days of you hear that you have an assembly and people go to the gym and half the people will skip and go do drugs or something behind the school and the other half will go to the assembly. So I was the half who went to the assembly anytime I heard that there was a speaker. I'm like, I don't even know what this speaker person is about. I don't know what they're talking to us today on the topic of, but I always loved in high school when they'd bring in some special guest and we would just sit in the gym and they would tell us stories or they would show us cool videos of places they went. And every time there was a speaker in our high school, I noticed that my experience was a positive one. So I just started to have this association with guest speaker equals awesome.
What were some of the early things that you spoke about? I think that's something that, for example, if I wanted to be a public speaker, that I would have a hard time breaking in on this unique topic that I knew about and maybe someone else didn't. What was it that you spoke about?
It began by me going around campus at midnight and giving midnight presentations in cafeterias as a way for me to hone the skill and practice content. So I literally would do this series called 11:59, which meant that at 11:59 p.m., I would be giving a 1-hour presentation on things that impacted students. Things like study tips, things like how to promote an event in residence, things like how to talk to your boyfriend or girlfriend if you're in a long-distance relationship. And that was my way of building my own resume, for lack of a better term. And those were the topics that I used to start charging for my speaking at other universities. And so I still do a lot of that, focus on transitioning students out of high school and into university. But then that evolved into helping students transition out of elementary school and into high school. And then that evolved into, well, wait a minute, so much of the life of these people is spent online. And so then I pivoted also into how to help people transition into their life online, which mainly is a focus for kids. So when they get their first phone, how do we support them so that the way they build a community, the way they build friendships, the way they show up is positive, productive, and hopefully impactful on themselves and others in a uplifting way and an intentional way. So that was what I was up to with students and in schools, and it's also evolved into work with companies and small business owners, mainly on the topic of not just transition, but how do we use appreciation and recognition in every single thing that we do. And that was kind of my secret expertise with all these topics was, yeah, we're talking about transition, but we're actually talking about how to form new relationships in new places using appreciation and recognition so that these are positive experiences for yourself and others.
That's a great transition to what I want to talk about next, which is exactly this appreciation and recognition thing. What is it that came to you and made you think, oh, this is what it's all about? It's not about transitioning. It is about appreciation and recognition. What kind of made you gravitate toward that in the first place?
For me, appreciation spun out of, I would give these presentations, and as one of the parts of my presentation, as a way to make it very live and very spontaneous and not just a scripted talk, I would make a phone call from the stage and mimic a prank phone call. Because prank phone calls are hilarious. People are like, oh, what's going to happen? And people don't know what the response will be. And it generates energy. Like if you and I were to make a prank phone call to someone right now, we'd like have anticipation. So I would talk about that and get all these audience members excited, like, oh, I love prank phone calls. But then I'd flip it into, okay, well, prank phone calls are hilarious and energizing, but they kind of take someone down for it to be successful. What if we did this in a way that was energizing, but we built someone up in order for it to be successful? So instead of prank calls, I started to do these things I call thank calls. And it's the exact same concept. So on stage, I literally hold up my phone and I don't know who I'm about to call. I scroll through the contacts and I'm in front of a group of like 1,000 young people. And when they yell stop, like it's a game show, I stop scrolling and then look at my phone, and wherever my hand has landed, I need to call that person on the spot, put it on speakerphone, and then into the microphone. I need to thank that person for an impact they've had on me. Because every single person in your phone, you know in some way, maybe you are married to them, maybe you met them once and exchanged contact info at a conference 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's risky for me because I don't know who I'm about to call. I'm on stage. I can't control this portion. This might go amazing. This might go poorly. But I've now made over 1,000 individual thank phone calls from the stage. And it's basically down to a science in terms of how they all go. And every time I call someone, the first ring that is sounded on the phone, the audience, like they go pin drop silent. By the second ring, there might be people that are covering their face and like giggling a little bit. Some people literally take their shirt and like cover their face out of nervousness and because they can't stop just giggling. And then when they pick up or when it goes to voicemail, the audience just leans forward. Not because I told them to, but they're like, and then all I'm doing is I'm thanking somebody for something that they've done to impact my life. And then we cheer as a group, just make a bunch of noise and celebrate the person over the phone. Then I hang up. And it's like a 1-minute interaction that I've done over 1,000 times now. And I did that mainly because I wanted one part of my presentation to be cool, spontaneous, and unplanned. And now, over the years, people have said, like, that was the coolest part. They'll never forget it. They kept the voicemails. They are sad that they didn't pick up sometimes. And I thought the other parts of the presentation were cooler because I play guitar, I play drums. But literally the audience over the years have said, like, that is the most impactful thing. And the reason why is because they often said they've never thought of doing that. And it's so simple. Like, we could literally do one on this podcast. Like, you could bust out your phone, or I could bust out my phone, put it on speaker, and, like, call somebody. And so because that was such a powerful part of the presentations and such an energizing thing for me and the audience, I just extrapolated from there and made appreciation, recognition, and unexpected thank yous like the backbone for the work that I do in the world.
You mentioned how energizing this activity was and how everyone enjoyed it, and yet I find, at least, like the shortage of acknowledgments. And despite the fact that it makes everyone feel great, it doesn't just make necessarily the receiver feel great. Even the one giving it feels great. Why do you think it is that we just forget to acknowledge everyone in our lives so often?
I did research on this because I had the same question. Like, what's the deal with this? So there was this study done at Harvard by two medical professionals, and they got a group of 10 people in and put them into three groups. Actually, that's incorrect. It was 10 weeks for three groups. I'm not sure the amount of people, but over 10 weeks, one group was asked to keep a journal of everything that was positive in their day. Group 2 was asked to keep a journal of everything that was negative in their day. And Group 3 was asked to keep a journal of their day. So it was kind of like positive group, negative group, neutral group with just journals. And at the end of the 10 weeks, it showed that the people that tracked the positive events in their day, they showed an increase in physical activity, an increase in energy, and a decrease in visits to doctors. So it was essentially saying that by just looking for things that are good and what they appreciate in their day, there's positive benefits mentally, physically, which then ripples out. And that's not rocket science, but if you were to interview 100 people, the number of people that keep a journal looking for positive things in their day is probably low. So another study that I found, it says that the three main reasons we don't appreciate people more often is because, number one, we forget, which seems stupid. Like, the leading reason people don't appreciate people is because we forget. But it's obvious because appreciation is never mandatory.
Yeah. We've got all these other things going on in our days, in our minds.
Right.
That's just not necessarily the top of the list all the time.
Yeah. And then the second reason it said is because people don't know if they want to be judged or considered weird. Because it's weird if I just out of nowhere call you, Jonathan, to say, you know what, we met like 5 years ago at a party. We had a wicked conversation. It just popped into my mind. So I wanted to call you and tell you that. And with your life experience, I might be calling you while you're in Russia or something, out of the middle of nowhere. And the third reason people don't appreciate each other is apparently because they don't know what to say. So think of these reasons. We forget, we don't want to be weird, and we don't know what to say. These are more than enough fuel to not do it. So the only times we really do it is main events like birthdays, anniversaries, but that's expected. It's almost forced.
Yeah.
So it's there and it's meaningful, but it doesn't come from a spontaneous, unexpected, energizing place.
Yeah.
It's expected, it's borderline mandated. And then the other time is in tragedy. So we're really good at appreciating each other when there's a big life change or there's a tragedy that prompts a life change. So for me, I love looking for ways to remind myself and others, hey, let's do it at other times also. Because one, it's easy. Not easy, but it's simple. Two, it's meaningful. And three, people remember it.
Yeah.
If I gave you a random thank phone call while you were traveling the world in a van a few years ago, and it came out of the blue and we hadn't talked for 3 years, today, when we reconnected, we would probably reflect on that moment. And
Absolutely.
It's a positive one. And I assure you that you would have told someone else that event took place. It's guaranteed impact and easy to forget to do. So those are the reasons why technically people forget to appreciate or don't appreciate. But deeper down, I think it's also because you look around, it's just not common. I mean, so why do it?
You're listening to the Mindful Communication Podcast. And today we're speaking with Blake Fly all about appreciation and recognition. It's so clear how many barriers there are. There's so many reasons to forget. There's so many reasons to not want to appreciate others. And yet, when we get that appreciation, we really appreciate it. It's this amazing thing we can do in our days that can completely change how a person is experiencing life in that moment. And despite how precious that is, we often forget. In the second half of this interview, after taking our time to look at the why, we now get into the how. How do we give great, impactful acknowledgments that others will remember and really appreciate in their day? There's a couple things you mentioned I want to talk on. So, I mean, the first thing is about the major events. It's these cues almost for us to remind us, oh yeah, this is the time that you show appreciation. And I guess just like anything else in life, if we want to do it, if we want to change that habit, if we want to do it more often, we need more cues to do that.
Yeah.
So I guess based on that, like what are some suggestions you have that can maybe get us to remember to acknowledge more often those in our lives?
Awesome question. And I totally agree that the cueing is essential with something that isn't mandatory. When I used to work at those residences as a manager, part of my job was I needed to do monthly one-to-ones with the staff. And purely out of procrastination, I came up with a cue for appreciation. So because I just didn't want to start my day going into my email inbox and just getting into the noise of the job, because frankly, most emails for me in that job and for everyone is people need something from you. You open an email and it's usually because you just have to get back to someone. So before I would get into that each day, as a way to sort of frame my work for the next 10, 12 hours, I would pick one person on my staff team and I would give them a silent voicemail because we could do that on our phone system. So let's say that I was your manager and you were one of the people on my team. I would pick up the phone, type in your extension in your residence room. It silently calls you so you don't even hear a ring. It goes straight to your voicemail. And then I would just tell you one thing that I appreciated about what you've been up to this past month in your job. And then at some point, you're going to see a little light on your phone. Like, oh, someone left me a message. Must have been when I was at class. You pick it up. It's your boss out of nowhere just saying like, Jonathan, I saw the way that you talked to that student who was new in the residence, the way you welcomed them and greeted them and answered all their questions while their mom was dropping them off from the train station. That was amazing. And that's a big deal. I don't know if you realize that, but it's a big deal. Anyway, have a good day. See you around residence. Hang up. I would do this so that I didn't have to start my day with the crap that may have fallen into the inbox the night before. So that was selfish. But then every year I found that in my performance appraisals towards me as their manager, the question of what was an area for Blake to improve on? It was always email because I'm a slow emailer. And then what was one of the best things about Blake as your supervisor? Almost everybody would list their one thing as the silent voicemails. So again, it's this proof of, whoa, this stuff resonates. And my cue became, before I open my email, I will send a thank you to someone. So that was out of procrastination, but it has become one of my main cues. I've got like 12 more we can jump into, but for starters, that was like a real foundational cueing moment for me.
And I think the takeaway here is really taking a look at your own life, seeing some instance where you can have that cue and try to instill this habit. So whether it's through a sticky note or a reminder that pops up on your computer, just try to instill it more and more as a habit. Eventually, you won't even need that cue. You'll just habitually want to acknowledge others.
Yeah.
One thing you brought up was you got it down to a science.
Yeah.
I'd love to share with our listeners, maybe not necessarily a formula, but maybe just some guidelines as to how do we give a really great acknowledgement that someone's going to remember.
Okay. And yes, this is such a roadblock for some people. Like, I want to say thanks to somebody, but what the heck do I say? I actually did like a 3-month course on this with about 20 people. We just met up on Zoom, and I like walked them through each week a way to appreciate people in business. It was fun because I didn't realize how many questions people had. So
3 months just about how to acknowledge people in the business environment.
yeah. So how to
Fantastic.
use appreciation as a way to build your business.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the main ones that I focus on is like a framework to appreciate someone is whether it's typed, whether it's a written thank you card, whether it's verbal. I love starting this sentiment, if you will, with the words without you. Because if we start that way, it then accelerates our ability to find what has happened in my life because you are in it. Because without that, it's like, hey, Jonathan, thanks for having me on the podcast. It was really great. Anyway, see you soon. Like, that's thoughtful and nice and courteous and not even necessary. But then if I were to go into this without you thing, it's like, Jonathan, want to say thanks. Without you, I would not even know about van life. I wouldn't have even thought about what would it look like to literally just leave my day-to-day, experience the globe with the love of my life, and have conversations and experiences that will never be matched again. And without you, I would have not had one of the coolest conversations at a buddy's party where, frankly, I may have just had small chit-chat with someone, but rather I deep dove with you into the topic of lifestyle, design, travel, and just being an awesome partner with the woman you love. So for all these reasons and more, thanks. P.S. Your podcast is sick. So I went there in real time because I began with the things that if I didn't know you would have not come into my world.
That's an amazing tip. And I also want to put some quick context for our listeners. What Blake was talking about is that a couple of years ago, actually more than a couple of years ago, I had actually quit my job with my wife, and we did a long time dream of ours where we went on a big van trip around North America. So just to put some context, and Blake and I were actually talking about this right before I left, and we had a really wonderful conversation about it. So thanks for that wonderful acknowledgement. I felt very energized by that. Really great.
You're welcome. And yeah, the specificity is energizing too, because I went into the detail of our connection instead of, hey, thanks, man. It's been cool. Okay, bye.
Yeah. I really felt, I feel seen in that moment. I'm like, I see you. You're a human and you're going through your own things, and you brought all these great things to my life. So thank you. And it's so impactful that way. I absolutely loved it. And then I suppose that now that we maybe know a better way to acknowledge people, and we know why we may not want to acknowledge people, and we set up those cues, then it can become a more normal thing that we do, that we start acknowledging people more often.
Yeah.
For all the great things that they're bringing in our life. And I think one important area of acknowledgement that we often neglect is acknowledging ourselves.
Yeah.
And you actually have an event set up, a yearly event, where you really kind of focus on that aspect. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So years ago, I wanted to have a holiday party with my wife at our place. But then we went through the motions of, well, who do we invite? Do we invite our work friends, high school friends, our neighbors? Maybe they don't know each other. Maybe they won't get along. And then we just thought that this is a stupid discussion. So we just chose what would be an awesome evening, and let's just see who wants to show up. So we hosted a thank you party. And my wife was down for the idea. She's like, sounds great. Go for it. And I wanted to do it because I wanted to do something that emulated that phone call experience on stage, but for others and with others. So a thank you party was, we had 15 friends come to our apartment. We had some snacks, and everybody wrote thank you cards to one personal relationship and one professional relationship in their life. And then we read them to each other. This is a thank you party. Show up, have snacks, write cards, read them, go home. And it's actually awesome because the people in the room learn so much about others in the room. Because if I ask you to write a card to the 3 key people in your life right now and share it with me, oh my gosh, the amount of data and detail I'm going to get on the life of Jonathan is immeasurable. So those thank you parties you would do every few months at our apartment, and the big event that now exists was sort of a culmination of those. So now once a year, I basically host an annual thank you party. It's called New Year's Evolutions. It's like, okay, how have you evolved this year? And how can we look back and appreciate that evolution? But really, it's a big thank you party. And so it's an evening at the end of November every year where people buy tickets, fill up a venue in Toronto where I live, and I lead that experience. We're going to write some cards. We're going to look back on our year, and then people get up on the microphone in front of the crowd and they read their cards. They call some of those people on speakerphone. I have partnered with my awesome friend Peter Katz, who's a Juno-nominated epic musician, and he plays music and everything. So it's this beautiful evening that happens every November, and we just finished year 3 of 55 because it will happen for 55 years in a row.
55 years that you've committed to this.
I just got to be healthy and alive, but assuming that's all taken care of, this will take place for 52 more years.
And what has been the reception so far at these events? Have you gotten a lot of great things? Is it growing every year?
Yeah, the reception is that I'm always impressed people show up. Like, wow, people are coming to a thank you event. And what's cool is that the feedback I continuously hear is that it's a thing that people would forget to do or just not make time to do if this did not exist. Because I purposely am reaching out to people that I would consider just really driven, highly motivated individuals who I know are programmed to just look towards what's next. Like, what is their next goal? What is their next success, their next win? And that's awesome and admirable. Though sometimes I know that personality type, and I would include myself in this, is prone to forget to pause, look back, and go, hey, this is way further along than I used to be in my business, in my relationship, with my health, whatever. And even if it was a bad year in some domains, it's still progress. So it's not like a winner's circle to just celebrate the wins. It's an experience to acknowledge the year. And the reason why I say I'm doing it for 55 years is because whether people show up or not, this is a process I want to experience at least annually forever. Because otherwise, it's usually tragedy that gets us into this place of reflection and appreciation. I'd rather just do an event that puts us there also.
You know, there's a couple things that came up for me, and the first is around celebration and the importance of celebrating even our small wins, thinking about the way that you described acknowledgments earlier, how it really energizes the person receiving it and the person giving it. And I know that I struggle with this. I struggle to celebrate my own, even small victories. Yeah. Just completing a small project I'm working on or completing a fantastic interview that I've had with somebody. I'm not taking the time to celebrate those, yet those can be incredibly energizing moments. And I think that's what kind of your guests at these events are getting, right? In a big way.
Yeah.
I want to switch over to talking about your current project. Yeah. It's around being kind online. So can you tell us a little bit more about the program? I think you touched on it at the beginning, but maybe in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, so the spirit of all of this being appreciation and recognition, a few years ago, one of my greatest friends, his name is Dave Anderson, he and I began doing these presentations in elementary schools for kids. And it was also around how can we help kids appreciate themselves and others? Because sure, we hear about the awful things that happen in the lives of kids or the epic things that kids are up to. Though there's kind of this 80% in the middle where kids are just bumping along, living life, and there's some highs and there's some lows. So because so much of their life exists online, we built a program called My Life Online. And the focus of that presentation in schools was getting kids to ask a few key questions before they post something online to build a habit. Again, the cue is before you post it and hit that button, ask yourself these questions. And by doing that, odds are high that you are going to leave the other person intact, maybe you're even going to inspire that person. And if someone says to you, "Hey, I saw what you put online, Jonathan. Like I've been seeing what you're up to." That's okay. You have no worries about that, no concerns about that. And the questions we have kids ask themselves before posting something online are the following: is it true? Is it kind? And is it you? And all that is an opportunity for kids to go, am I just spreading a bunch of lies or rumors? If I am, let's not post that. And then assuming that it is true, is this kind? Or is it true but actually going to cause some pain for others? So if it's not kind, let's just leave it. But if it is true and it is kind, okay, we'll ask the final question. And that final question, is it you? We're basically getting kids to think, is this what you want to be saying to the world? And more importantly, is this what you want the world to be saying about you? And if they don't feel good about that, they just don't post it. But if they do, let it rip, because that will likely impact others in a positive way. And when it comes back to the kids, people see what they're up to. It's likely not going to haunt or hurt them. It may even help them. So really, it's a very similar spirit. Like, how can we just treat each other in a positive way? And remember that online, we're still people. So we say to kids, it's not a screen, it's a human being. Because when we're human to human, face to face, we carry ourselves in a certain way that sometimes we just omit on the internet.
Yeah, there's that distance already there, and we feel like we can kind of get away with saying anything. And it's interesting because you're giving this presentation to kids, yet it is just as relevant for adults, for us going online, not being kind, and
Yeah.
it might come back and bite us in the butts, right?
Yeah.
There's also something to be said about, I've said this quote before, the idea that as you are, you become. It's this idea that every day we go through life and we're doing things, we're practicing being certain ways. So if I'm constantly getting angry when I see things online, I'm going to be really good at getting angry. And if we're taking a moment to practice this level of self-awareness and ask myself, okay, well, is this kind? Yes, then I'm practicing being kind. And then it becomes, as we were speaking about with cues, we're talking about making it a habit to be kind, making it a habit to not get angry, not say things that are untrue.
Yeah.
And really, I think that what that brings is some more peace to the world, some more kindness to the world, and particularly not just the world, but the world around you. And so you start living in a world that's more kind, more true, less angry, more compassionate.
Yeah.
That's kind of like a cool long-term goal maybe with the program.
Yeah, and that quote that you shared, the way that you spoke about that, that's really inspiring. I've not heard that line, and I can see how people could just live into that daily, like moment to moment with that kind of mantra. So can you say it one more time just so that it like bakes into my brain?
Yeah, as you are, you become.
Cool.
So
Thank you.
practice your actions, practice your thoughts carefully. So where's 2019 going to take you? You're doing this Be Kind online program. This is a newer program. Are you really focused on that? Are you seeing new program development coming anywhere else? Again, with the backbone, it seems, of kindness and appreciation and recognition kind of driving a lot of your programming.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. The fuel is appreciation, recognition, gratitude. I love that world because typically it's considered this soft, fluffy topic, but I see the benefits of it in business, in schools, with kids, with adults, everything, even relationships, like couples, even. It's just such a great DNA for success in those areas. But a big focus for me this year is actually the work that we do with kids in the world of My Life Online. So I almost say that My Life Online, it's like my Monday to Friday. And then everything else that I'm up to with events and giving some speeches and doing other versions of how to amplify appreciation, those are like my extracurriculars. And a new focus with My Life Online is that we've been presenting in schools for a lot of years now, and that's awesome, though there's limitations because we can't go to all schools. People can't always afford flights. So we've now started to do something that is essentially like driver's ed for kids getting their first phone, because that doesn't really exist in a mainstream way. So a lot of parents, they freak out. There's so much fear around when do I give my kid a phone? What do I do when my kid's on a phone? There's inherently this anxiety, this worry, this almost terrified nature of, oh my gosh, my kid's going to get a phone. So what we have built is basically a way for parents to introduce their kids to their first smartphone instead of fight it as long as they can and then just hand their kid a phone and hope they don't get hurt. It's, well, sure, you're going to be on a phone at some point. It's 2019, for gosh sakes.
Yeah.
The average age of kids getting phones is, I think, 9 now.
Wow.
So this is sort of a bridge between kids without their own phone to kids with their own phone, which is really just a vehicle for impact and a vehicle for mindful communication. But sometimes kids don't understand that. Not because they're bad, because they're new at it.
Yeah.
So Smartphone Ready is our program that's like driver's ed for kids' first phones, and that's a big focus for the year ahead so that we can go beyond schools if there's limitations for us to get there.
I want to leave our listeners with a major takeaway of yours. I mean, what is one thing that maybe listeners can do this week that will make their lives better?
I've never said this as like a one takeaway, but I've recently started doing it, and I'm going to share this. And regardless of your age and stage and relationship you are or are not in, here's the tip. And it applies to everybody. My tip is to make your wedding invite list, because I just got married in the summer, so it's fresh for me. But so many of these conversations that we're now having is around, appreciation and relationships and cueing and habit formation. I think that what holds people back from appreciating people or even thinking this way is that we don't actually have a way to distill who are our most important people, our most enriched relationships. And just because I went through it recently, when you make a wedding guest list, it's the only time in your life where you literally rank your relationships, which sounds a little cold, but it's the way it is. If
Yeah,
you're
you can't
having,
invite everyone to your
you-
wedding,
you
right?
Can't.
Yeah.
And so there's only 2 times where you make a guest list of your most important people. One is a wedding and one is a funeral. And you're likely not planning the funeral guest list. And frankly, that's kind of a free-for-all. If you knew this person, we'd love you to be there.
Right.
So a wedding is the only time where you have a capacity issue and you have an opportunity to think of who are these relationships. So I say this to people now because just as an exercise, even if you are single, even if you've already been married, even if you're later in life, if you had to literally pick who are your 100 people that you would invite to a wedding, go for it. And in doing that, you have no choice but to filter your most fascinating relationships. And now that I have a wedding list, because we just made it, I use my wedding list as essentially my portal to decide who to reach out to and when and why. And it also helps with making decisions as to who you want to save your time for. So by making this list, then a habit can become, look at that list once a week. Let's call it Sunday night. Just a 5-minute glance through your list of who's coming to your wedding, whether you've had it, aren't having one, never want one, whatever. And then you can get a sense of who have you and have you not connected with recently, and in what ways can you reconnect and recharge those relationships.
Not to mention, this is a great opportunity to find a group of people you want to practice acknowledging, who would feel energized by an acknowledgement from you, and you would be energized by acknowledging them. And also just what comes to mind also is this, like, a list of people to be grateful for in your life who brought so many things to you.
Yeah.
How can our listeners get in touch with you if they want to ask questions or find out what you're up to?
The 2 main ways I would say are Instagram. I'm just Blake Fly. That's fly like a bird, just all one word, Blake Fly. And I'd give you my email, but I don't answer it too frequently. But here's my email. Just thank you for your patience in advance. I'm just Blake blake@blakefly.com. So that's blake@blakefly.com. Toss me an email, send me a message on Instagram, and those are ways that I can be tracked down. And if you have any questions, or if you have any hesitations with people that you want to reach out to and appreciate, but are like, this is weird, happy to help.
Blake, I want to take a moment here and acknowledge you, because who you are for me is someone who brings the best out of others. You're someone who is so playful and fun and friendly and makes at least me feel very comfortable. So I want to thank you for being you and coming on this podcast.
Thank you, Jonathan Miller. It's been a delight to reconnect in this way.
Big thanks goes out to Blake for coming on to the show, and to Nucleus Sound Studios for providing us with the beautiful space. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, give it a great rating as well. Share it with friends, family, anyone on any social media channel. You can also get in touch. Check us out on Facebook at Mindful Comms, Instagram at Mindful Communication, or go to the website mindfulcommunication.me and check out what programs we have happening there. Today's music was produced by Shinogo. You can check out Shinogo's music on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, and Google Play. And editing help by Maya Miller. Once again, you've been listening to the Mindful Communication Podcast. My name is Jonathan Miller, and thank you so much for tuning in today.